Okay, Life's Single Lesson. And this was the song I was going to do, and I may do at the end of this. We'll see how that goes. Is I Can't Hide, and it's a song. It's sort of based on the idea of reincarnation. And I've always been told when I was going through ministerial training not to talk about reincarnation on a Sunday morning because it's an unorthodox idea. But I figured that if you're all here, you're probably pretty unorthodox anyway. So, but the other side of that is, if it is a fact, and I think it is, people will disagree, but if it is a fact, then why not talk about it? Why pretend like it's something we have to hide or have to cover up? But there are things about the idea of reincarnation that I find challenging also, and that is the idea that we have to come back to learn lessons, or we're here to learn lessons, and if we don't learn them, we have to come back and learn them. And this Life Single Lesson, Recollection of the Soul, the idea of recollection, it's an idea that is based in mystical tradition. And by mystical, I'm not talking about some weird woo-woo stuff. I'm talking about basically the spiritual side of the Christian movement, which is not orthodox. It's not the popular side, but it is a side that has accompanied the development of Christianity all along, and that is the mystic sees the individual as one with God. So the process of recollection we would call meditation. And it's a recentering or a reconnecting with your source. So the recollection is not a developing of spiritual understanding as much as it is experiencing what is true of you at the deepest level. And that is a very difficult thing for most of us to grasp, because where we are living from, the level of ourselves we're living from is the surface level, the personality, the persona, the mask, and I refer to this often as the self-image. There's all kinds of terms for it. Paul called it the natural man. And he warned about conforming to the world, conforming to appearances, things we see. And the reason is because we look outside of ourselves and we forget who we are. And so we have to actually practice something special, something different. The mystics call it recollection. We would call it meditation. But I have also called it recovery. Those of you that are in a recovery process, a recovery program, what you're doing is recovering your wholeness. It's the same idea. We're all in spiritual recovery. We're remembering who and what we are at the deepest level of our being. And that's not something that is... it seems foreign to us. When we step upon this spiritual path, we have to learn how to be true to ourselves. It's a total contradiction to how we're designed. We're never intended to forget, but our Western culture is very good about drawing our attention to the outside. I'm not enough. I'm not complete, so I need to do things, add things to my life to feel complete. We see the soul as, basically we enter this plane as a blank slate, and that slate has to be written upon, has to be filled up. And so we do that through education, we do it through marriage, we do it through ownership of things. The more we accumulate, we do it through career. And then we start identifying ourselves not by what we are or who we are, but by what we have. And that's a big difference. And really what the spiritual path is about is unloading the false conceptions of who and what we are at the deepest level. That's what we're really doing. We're not learning new things. We're letting go of the things that are not true about ourselves. And again, our Western culture is all about adding information. It's about filling the brain with new ideas, with things that we don't know. There's definitely a place for that, and it's a very important part of our taking on this body. But it's important to maintain the distinction, the recollection, the memory of who we are at the spiritual level. So it's fair to say, I think, that Most who have embraced the spiritual alternative to the mainstream concepts of heaven and hell are comfortable with the notion that earth is a school and we've come to advance the soul. And as I have talked about many times, I believe that for many years. And you'll see it in some of my books. It's very frustrating when I go back and look at my books because I see an evolution of thought. I'm not there anymore. I see things in a different way. And I have compared this to, if you think of, if you have a barrel of water and you take a cup and you dip a cup of water from that barrel, what water is the oldest of those two vessels, of the barrel and the cup? And just a little bit of thought says they're the same age. So what if 10 years passes and you take another cup and you dip water from that barrel again? Now which of the water is, what is the age of the water in all three vessels? And the answer is the same. They're all the same age. And scientists tell us about 4.6 billion years. Old water. When you're drinking water, you're drinking something very old. But if you think of the barrel of water as God, as the source, and every vessel that you use to dip the water from that barrel as us, as a soul, the water in the vessel, in the cup, is the same stuff, same age, same everything. The time it was drawn from the barrel, that's what's different. And so we say there are old souls, there are young souls, which by this we mean there are mature souls and there are immature souls. There are souls that have it together and souls that don't, souls that are learning, and we probably, most of us, place ourselves in that category. I'm an immature developing soul. But the truth is we're all the same stuff. There's one soul, one life, one source. And yes, we've all been dipped from the barrel at different times. But that which we are is the same age. And so one of the breakthroughs that I make is I stop saying I'm a young soul, I'm immature, I don't know everything I need to know as a soul. So the spiritual journey becomes something different from what I thought it was. The spiritual journey is recollection. I remember that I am drawn from this barrel of water. And I start thinking from that perspective. If that's true, then what? Then how do I handle this whole situation? And the fact is that I am a soul expressing through a body. And that is a very different thing than thinking I have come here to develop my soul. And I've said many times before too, what would a soul that operates on a very high level, as we discover in our near-death research, people step out of their body for a moment and they find they have powers that are undreamed of. They had no idea. So that person that has that experience is the same person that's in the body, same soul. There's no growth, no development. It takes place in the twinkling of an eye. The body has the effect of dumbing down our spiritual self, our spiritual awareness. And our spiritual job is, our journey is to recall or to get back in touch with this deeper level. So I don't think anymore that the earth is a school that we're here to learn. If we don't learn it, we have to come back. If you're interested in reincarnation, one of the best studies, I think, was started by Ian Stevenson and picked up by Jim Tucker, both of the University of Virginia. And their work it spans a period of about 50 years. They have several thousand cases on record that they consider proven or verified. And what their work is, Ian Stevenson started out by, he would hear of a child that was recalling past life. And he would go visit this child and follow up on the statements that they made to the child. Would be talking about a family that they lived with in another village, or someone they were married to, or some whatever clues the child would be talking about. And they would start talking at age about 30 months. And that memory would stay with them, those recollections or those memories would stay with them through about age 7 to 8, 9, something like that, and some even longer. But so Ian Stevenson would go visit these children, and he would follow up on the stories they told, and he would consider verified any matches that he made. And there are just some incidents where the children would describe exactly the relationship they were involved in, and Stevenson would take the child back to the family, and they would identify people. That was my husband, that was my wife, back when I was big. And so I prefer that type of study. And again, there's 50 years of cases that he and now Jim Tucker, Ian Stevenson has passed on. But Jim Tucker is one that followed up with that work, and he's active at this moment. So there are some books from both of them, but just do a web search, Ian Stevenson or Jim Tucker or both, and you'll find a pretty substantial amount of information on them. But they preferred talking to children because children are absolutely honest. They had a little suspicion of regression, hypnotic regression. And maybe some of you have done that. You've had some experiences with that, and I think that's interesting. But their argument is children don't have any, dog in the fight in terms of proving reincarnation. I think I've had one case in my 40 years ministry of a little boy that was 3 years old that was brought to me that said he was his great-grandfather. And there were several instances that the grandmother and mother and the boy came into my office and went over the story with me. The boy wouldn't talk to me, but the mother and grandmother would. And the interesting thing about this, they were freaked out by this little boy's recollections and the fact that he took them to the cemetery one day where he was buried. And he described the flower arrangements. He described the people that were there, where they were standing. The whole 9 yards. And what was intriguing about this is the parents were Baptists. They had absolutely zero belief in reincarnation. So they were saying, what in the world is going on? And Ian Stevenson at the time was alive, and I tried to put them in touch with him to follow up, but I think they didn't want to have anything to do with that. But they had a problem. They had a 3-year-old boy that was having memories, past life memories that were actually very accurate. And I later on typed up that case and sent it to Jim Tucker, and he emailed back and said it looked like a very promising case, but the boy by now would be in his, 30s or so, pretty old, and I don't know where he is. But it would be an interesting follow-up. But kids don't make stuff up like this. They have fantasies, and a lot of parents, when they start talking about their past lives, they do this. Parents think they're, a kid fantasizing about things, but then something they say will catch their attention that they can't deny. They verify they know that what they're talking about is something that actually happened. But what's also interesting about this is why the kids come back. And very few of the cases, in fact, none of the cases I've ever read, I've read quite a few, have said I've come back to advance my soul. One woman came back, for example, because her husband had been cheating on her, and she wanted to come back as a man so she could cheat on her husband or cheat on her wife. It doesn't matter today. But so is that a good reason to come back? There was another little girl that just did not like her father, did not like her parents. She wanted to have her aunt as her mother. And she actually caused herself to catch pneumonia. This happened in Spain. to catch pneumonia and die. And not long after that, her aunt became pregnant and had this child, and it was the girl. And the girl recalled all of her life. So what is there about soul advancement, in things like this? They discover a lot of times that kids who were addicted to smoking cigarettes or alcohol, they come back, these little kids want to have a cigarette, or they want to drink alcohol. And the most interesting thing about it is both Stevenson and Tucker say that the kids that tend to remember their deaths had a traumatic death. And maybe they were shot or stabbed or murdered in some way, or had just some horrible thing happen, and they're the ones that remember. That's not always the case, they say, but that's pretty common. But what's bizarre about it is a kid may have been shot through the head, and he's got an entrance and an exit wound on both sides, and the new kid, as an adult they were shot, but as they come back as a kid they have a birthmark in that very place. And he has documented many, many cases of this. And it's just, or a phobia maybe. Maybe they drown and they have a phobia of swimming, they have a phobia of water, or fell off a cliff and have a phobia of heights or something like that. But the point is, does the soul come back here to learn, or do we come back here because we want to have this experience for whatever reason? And I have come to think that now, that I'm here not because I have to be, but because I want to be. And almost anything I do, if I do it because I want to do it, not because I have to do it, I enjoy it a lot more. You ever notice that? If you're forced to do things, you're reluctant. You don't give your whole self to it. But if you realize you're here because you want to be here, it puts a whole different slant on things. So just to kind of further this argument, so we have pets. All of us have probably had pets. I don't have any at this moment. But our daughter has moved back in with us, so that's sort of like that. And we're really enjoying her. And we can't have a pet at this moment because she's allergic to pets, so that's probably a good thing. But would you say the same is true of your pet? Do you assume their soul has much to learn? And everything I hear about people's pets is exactly the opposite. Nobody thinks their pet is here to advance their soul. That animals are expressing a purity that we envy, that we would like to also express. They don't seem to express judgment, at least toward their owner, or I don't know if we're the owners or the ones owned, but it's a totally unconditional relationship. And we admire that. We would like to get to the point where we too express unconditional love. Although we used to have a black, what are those black dogs that are pointers? Black lab, yeah, duck dogs, I guess. We had one of those that hated the UPS man. So it was not unconditional love, on all sides. But I never considered any pet that I ever owned as needing to grow, needing to advance. What they lack is the imagination, as I talked about last week. But we see in our pets an irresistible purity that would be difficult to improve upon. Would it even cross our mind that they've come to correct some soul deficit? We're more likely to think they've come to help us with ours. And I'm just using that as an example to put this in perspective. We see the only species on this planet we think needs soul growth is the one that's the most advanced. That's us. So we have this imagination that has invented a picture of ourselves as incomplete, where we look out at the animal world, pets or even wild animals, and we see that they are all operating in a balance that we don't see in the human expression. I've talked about in one of my books, talked about the herd of 100,000 wildebeest. You look at that. We're not too familiar with wildebeest, but I'm just kind of imagining that if you know one, you've kind of known them all. They've got a personality that like a cow or anything. They do have a personality. But they all behave the same, and they don't invent computers, they don't invent vehicles, they don't have politics, they don't do all the things that we get involved in as human beings. So you look at 100,000 wildebeests, and then you think back a million years at how wildebeests would have behaved back then. Probably very much the same as they do now. There's not this diversity among the herd. But you go into a town of 100,000 human beings, and you'll find diversity is rampant. We don't all have the same religion, we don't have the same philosophy, we don't have the same politics, we don't have the same hobby interests, we don't have the same interests in food and decorations and all the stuff that that separates us in terms of our interests. So we have everything the wildebeest has, but we have this added feature called imagination. And it allows us to create a world that doesn't exist in the natural world. And one of the worst inventions that we have all come up with is a self-image. It's the belief that we are separate from our source. We've been drawn from this barrel of water, and so we think, I'm the glass that has this bit of water in it. We identify with the glass. That's what I am. And I was drawn from this barrel of water, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago. I'm a certain gender, I'm a certain color, I'm a certain, have certain interests and all that. But I live between the bookends of birth, that time I was drawn from that water, to death, to when I'm poured out, or my glass breaks, or whatever. So that's how I identify myself. And the identifying feature, the nucleus of that identification is the glass. It's the body. And we say, I am this old, I am feeling this way, I'm, this or that. We identify with the body. When in truth, we are the water. We are ageless. And that's what recollection is all about. It's recalling. But see, I don't think animals ever leave that consciousness. I don't think they have the ability to step outside of that consciousness and imagine themselves as needing to learn, needing to grow. That's a strictly human invention. You don't see nature struggling to be something that it is not. But you see humanity on every front doing that very thing. And that is something we should take note. So we see ourselves as less than the animal in this regard. I'm not as spiritual as my pet. I don't have the insight because I'm not at peace. I'm still struggling. I'm still doing this or that thing. And just the opposite is true. We are far advanced, and we have this faculty of imagination because the soul is absolutely unrestricted, and the imagination is the unrestricted ability to accommodate that infinite soul. And there's no limit to what it can do. And we see in our inventions, our technology developments and so forth, we see all the advancements we make there. And while we're doing that, it becomes a very intellectual thing. It's an amazing thing, actually. But it becomes a very intellectual thing where the universe is happening out there, and I'm perceiving it, and I'm weighing, measuring, and putting myself in a certain perspective in relation to it all. I'm not seeing that I am the very substance of this living thing that I call the universe, or I call God, call it whatever you want. I am an expression of this barrel of water, this infinite reservoir. So we put ourselves in we handicap ourselves with the imagination. I've talked about Thomas Trord saying that the human being is the only species that can develop things that are not natural. And the illustration he gave is you take a lump of iron and you put it in water, let it go, and what's it do? It sinks. But if you take that same iron and you fashion it into the hull of a ship, it'll float. And ships do not naturally occur. They don't grow on trees. You can't dig them up someplace. They're not developed. That is a human development. And if you think of all the things we've done that do not, you have almost two worlds. You have the natural world, which went on for millions of years, unchanged, and then humanity comes in, and the imagination begins to rise, and we've developed another world, a world that is not found in the natural world. And you see that in cities, you see it in any unnatural occurrence, a house, a car, a shoe, a hammer. All of these things are products of the human imagination, and they are so practical and so real to us that we have identified with that aspect. But we are human beings we're spiritual beings going through a human experience. We've taken on a body. And by taking on that body, that's our interface. We have identified with the glass, with the interface, saying that's who and what I am. And in truth, we recall. We do the process of recollection is pulling ourselves back to remembering, I am a complete soul right now. God doesn't make junk, as the bumper sticker would say. I'm not junk. I am a soul who took on a body to experience this material plane. I am the soul who took on the body. I'm not a body with a soul. And if you think about all of the energy you put in the body, maintenance, transportation, all the stuff that is centered, it's 99% of our thinking. That's our world. When we say, I would like to prosper, we're saying, I want to change my external conditions. I want to make them better. The external conditions are the body's interface with this planet. So what I do is translate that into thinking my soul is incomplete. But just think about the water. You draw the water from the barrel. 1,000 years from now, that water will still be the same as the barrel, water in the barrel. 1,000 years past, the water's in this container and in the barrel is the same age. One doesn't change over the other. So-called spiritual learning is simply soul recollection, the act of reawakening to what I am at the deepest level. This is important because of how we start our spiritual practices. We pick up a book, and what are we saying to ourselves when we pick up that book? This person has more wisdom than I do. When we sit down to meditate, I can't do this very well because I'm not as advanced, I'm not as practiced as, but if I practice and practice and practice, someday I'll be able to stop my mind and recall my soul. We have it backwards. We start out treating ourselves as the amateur. I don't know. But somebody does, and somebody can teach me, somebody can tell me. I have much to learn. So if we say, okay, when I sit down to try to be still, my mind starts doing this. Think of that water. My soul is now complete, and it is radiating that completeness. Can I open myself to that wholeness, to that completeness? Can I recall that? Can I engage in recollection? Can I let my soul teach me what is true of it? And let the personality go, let the garment, let the interface go long enough to be reminded of who and what I am at this deepest level. As I said, you don't meditate to learn anything. Meditation is the act of recollection. It's like that the soul is an inner light shining. And as we open our mind to it, that's what we're doing, stilling the mind from all of the body-based thinking that we do, and just letting these beams of light touch the intellect. It's as Emily Cady said, the intuition, that's the inner opening, and the intellect are designed to travel together. But the intuition takes the reins. It's the leader. It becomes the leader. But so much of our spiritual learning is about developing the brain, developing the intellect. I need to stuff more information in. But the whole thing is, as Browning said, to release the imprisoned splendor of the soul. How do you do it? The soul knows how to do this. That's the important thing. You don't learn this stuff. You already know it. But it's the willingness. Am I willing to sit down and be still, take my mind out of all of the things I'm battling with, whether it's a financial issue, a health issue, a relationship issue, whatever it may be, to stop trying to use spiritual principles to solve those problems, and let the first step be to recollect, to recall the soul. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added. That makes perfect sense from this point of view. Experience your wholeness first, and then you know how to think about the rest of it. You know how to make choices concerning the rest of it. But we try to get it all figured out, with apply spiritual principles so we'll be more prosperous, we'll be more healthy, we'll be more guided, and all of these things. I'm experiencing a health challenge at the moment, but my soul is not. And so what I will do when I go home is I will sit down and just open myself to that wholeness. The body screws up sometimes. It gives out. But the soul never does. I don't know how long I'm going to be on this planet. I don't know. None of us know. I do know it's not going to be forever. Charles Fillmore believed we could stay in this body forever. I don't believe that. I do believe I don't want to. I want to try a few other things. So the lessons we learn have less to do with soul development and more to do with conducting life successfully through this temporary physical interface of the body. That's where the lessons are. How do I inhabit a body on this planet successfully? How do I do that? And it all comes back to the first step is recollection, recalling who you are as a spiritual being. Because if you're not recalling who you are, you're trying to fix somebody else. You're trying to fix an invention. And we don't see our pets doing that. Our animals do have a lot to teach us in that regard. They're not trying to make themselves better. As I've talked about, watch the birds around your bird feeder. They're not out there trying to. The finches aren't trying to be doves, and the doves aren't trying to be sparrows, and the sparrows aren't trying to be cats, and they're not trying to be something other than they are. They are fulfilling who and what they are, and they're okay with that. But that which is looking out at that is the one that's having the problem. I'm not happy where I am. I want to be somewhere else. I need more information. I need more knowledge. I need to be something I'm not today. So don't get lost in why you may have made the choice to come here. And I like to think that we all have. I like to think that my life is a choice. I'm here because I want to be, not because I have to be. It takes a certain amount of pressure off of you when you say, God didn't force me to come here to learn more lessons. I don't even have a clue what those lessons are. That's what I was always asking. You're going through some horrible experience saying, God, what am I supposed to learn from this? The one thing I have learned is I don't ever want to do it again. And the next time you're in one of those things, you're saying the same thing. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. So what do you learn from that? Whatever you learn from that, you don't apply it in the next one. Another one's going to happen. It doesn't matter what you've learned. You're there again, doing the same stuff. No matter what you have learned about conflict or about living successfully through some situation, you're going to be in another one where none of your learning applies. And it's just an ongoing thing. As long as we're on this planet, in this body, that's what's going to be happening. So don't get lost in why you may have made the choice come here, focus only on the truth that you are a soul that is already complete, already free. As you get a solid understanding of this, you begin directing your body and your environment to conform to your reason for coming. In other words, I'm here because I want to be, and life starts looking quite different. Okay? Thank you for coming out, and we'll see you again next week. And